Thank you so much, Orla, for such a wonderful and kind introduction. And it is really my distinct pleasure to be here today. We've heard about some of the statistics, and they are so important. In fact, that's another passion of mine, as Catherine well knows. She is. But there are people behind the statistics, and there are lived experiences. There's a lived life. There are lived lives. There's a collective. There's individuals. There's all of that happening. And sometimes that can get lost in the percentages, the proportions, the significance, and all of those things. And so this talk is about what's the lived experience? We know that people who have fibromyalgia have some difficulties with eating, drinking, swallowing, and communication. What are they? I don't think it's enough to say that they're there. And who's going to say what they are? The people who are living that are going to tell us. And that's hugely important. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Joanne, who will be talking first about interviews with people who have fibromyalgia and their experiences of eating, drinking, and swallowing. Then we have Mathilde, who will talk about interviews with family members of people who have fibromyalgia and their experiences of witnessing, of being with, of sometimes caring for, sometimes just worrying. What are their experiences? Then I'm going to pop in again, and I'm going to talk about blogs, online blogs, because what do we do when we need to know something? We Google it. And there's a lot of information out there, and we've kind of brought that together to try and match it with the empirical research and synthesize what are people with fibromyalgia actually saying about eating, drinking, swallowing, and communication problems. And then the last piece is also me, and it's what are we going to do with this? What can we take from it? What can we learn from it, and where do we go from here? And so that's how the talk is going to go. So my pleasure to hand over now to Joanne, who'll talk you through the first bit.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joanne, and today I will be speaking to you about the research I carried out as part of my final year of my undergraduate degree. I conducted a study to find out how people with fibromyalgia are affected by eating, drinking, and swallowing problems. Perfect, there we go. So to give some background, first of all, to the study, people with fibromyalgia, as we've already discussed today, they can experience difficulties eating and drinking, as Catherine perfectly described earlier on. But there is very limited research available that discusses the impact that these problems can have on people, the real life impact. And this could lead to people with fibromyalgia receiving care that is not effective or appropriate to their situation. And based on this lack of research, I aimed to find out how people with fibromyalgia were impacted by these issues. And to do this, I interviewed 8 volunteers, and then I analysed their responses, where I found there were 5 dominant themes. So firstly, each participant reported physical swallowing problems, which led to them experiencing issues in social situations, which we've already touched on today. Then these physical and social issues caused subsequent emotional effects, and the problems that these participants reported caused them to seek out help and guidance from healthcare professionals, and these experiences brought them to where they were at the time of the interviews, which is where they were using coping strategies to try and manage their swallowing problems independently. I'm going to talk through each theme now in more detail, and I have some quotes in my slides that illustrate the thoughts and feelings of the participants. So, firstly, the participants described a variety of physical symptoms that ranged in severity And the issues that were identified were throughout every phase of the swallow. So like Orla was talking about earlier on, the food goes in and it goes down and the entire journey throughout. So some quotes that represent this theme are, "I can choke on anything. It's just very difficult to explain it. It can be a tiny droplet of water. It can be saliva. It can be like, I'm really choking." So that's choking. It's such a terrifying experience. Anyone, I'm sure, whether you have fibromyalgia or not, everyone's experienced water going down the wrong way or food going down the wrong way. And, it is a very frightening experience. Another participant said, "Sometimes I can't find a swallow," which sounds really weird. So they couldn't actually initiate a swallow for food or saliva to leave their mouth. And then another participant said, "My husband had to do the Heimlich on me about 3 or 4 times. He had to do the Heimlich on me because the choking has gotten so bad that I just couldn't breathe." These symptoms described included experiencing pain while swallowing also, and discomfort caused by reflux or the feeling of food going down the wrong way. The physical issues described led to social issues for the interviewees. They described that they avoided social interactions, had limited choice when going out for a meal, and some participants described feeling more conscious of their swallowing problem when in a public place. One participant said, "I couldn't go out for a burger in a sit-down situation because I'm guaranteed now if I bought this big burger, I'd be guaranteed that I'd have trouble getting it down." So that's where we were talking earlier about avoiding social situations. The reasons for it can be very real for the participants. Another participant said, "I can't drink any alcohol. I can't enjoy life particularly. I can't go out for dinners." So this shows that the participants' social lives were affected by their swallowing problems, which, that subsequently can lead to the emotional impact and effects reported by the volunteers. However, there were differences between the emotions caused by the physical issues and the social issues. Anxiety and fear of choking were the most common emotions associated with the physical symptoms, with one participant saying, "I'm eating to live. I don't enjoy it. I don't. It's not an enjoyable experience to eat, but I know I have to because I know I won't survive without it." So that's really showing that eating and drinking can be such a natural thing for people, but if you have problems with it, it can really cause some significant emotional effects. Now, the experiences, when the participants had these experiences, naturally they searched for help from healthcare professionals, and their experiences were not wholly positive. They described feeling dismissed and unsure, with some participants explaining that their doctors and speech and language therapists did not understand their symptoms. They discussed that there was a lack of follow-up in their cases, with limited assessment and intervention options offered to them. One participant said, "I've done this all myself. I haven't really had that much support from anybody, I have to say, apart from me." This experience led to the final theme identified. Each participant described coping strategies that they created independently because unfortunately they did not find the support that they were looking for in healthcare situations. These strategies helped them to manage their swallowing problems. This included reducing meal sizes, modifying their diets so that they were less likely to experience difficulties, and using calming strategies to try and prevent choking episodes. But the participants, while they were managing their swallowing problems, they weren't really finding any effective strategies or support out there to really make a difference and improve their eating and drinking. One quote, for example, is, "I haven't had a proper full meal, like a dinner plate-sized meal, for about 1.5 years, which of course would lead to other nutritional and physical difficulties associated with not eating enough." And finally, some people had strategies that were facilitated by their friends and family, which Mathilde will speak about shortly. One of my participants said, my mum will just tell me to relax, or to, if I was with her, she'd make me a hot drink, and sit me down. So while they found support in family members, they're similarly to healthcare situations, they were doing most of this independently. So the key findings from this research would be, firstly, that all participants reported they experienced negative psychological and social impacts caused by their swallowing problem. Participants managed their swallowing problems independently. However, some coping strategies were facilitated by family and friends. And finally, participants reported feeling unsupported when interacting with healthcare professionals. Thank you all for listening, and I will now pass on to Mathilde, who will be speaking about her research to do with family and carers.
Sorry, I'm a bit nervous, but hi everyone, my name is Mathilde McNamara, and like Joanne, I completed a study looking at fibromyalgia for my final year research project. So I looked at communication problems and swallowing difficulties associated with fibromyalgia, and as the girls mentioned, these are frequently overlooked. But I took a unique stance, and I looked at how these difficulties impacted the patient's loved ones, their families, their partners, and even their close friends. So research shows that these symptoms are experienced by many participants. However, the research base is very limited. Moreover, the lived experiences of these patients and their families are not adequately explored. So carer burden and stress is often associated with living with someone with any illness, including a chronic illness. The research base informed me that if these people are not listened to and not understood, their burden will further increase. So I wanted to look at how fibromyalgia is impacting the lives of these carers, and I also wanted to look at their understanding of the symptoms, what supports are available to them. So I spoke to 7 people across Ireland and the UK, each with a close relationship to someone with fibromyalgia. And 6 main themes emerged from the interviews. So I'm going to go through those now with quotes like Joanne did. Yes, so the first theme was their participants' understanding and description of the swallowing difficulties experienced by their loved ones. So you can see here that there were some mild symptoms reported, such as the sensation of food getting stuck when going down. And then there were some more severe symptoms, such as choking episodes where, as Joanne said, the Heimlich maneuver had to be used. And then there are just some more examples up here now of the swallowing difficulties. And then we had the communication difficulties, so similar to what Orla was talking about, those word-finding difficulties, that brain fog. So, and there was also voice difficulties and memory issues reported. So these are all impacting communication. So how you even have a conversation with someone, if you have those memory problems, you might get stuck and then there's a communication breakdown. And again, that's the problem that many reported. So then we had the emotional impacts of these difficulties. So tension, anger, and frustration were frequently discussed. And we see here one participant said, when she'd have these problems, then I'd get really angry. And another said, I ended up snapping. Other emotions included worry and sadness, as seen here, where one participant said, but then I can't relax. So they were more of the feelings. And then we had the fourth theme was around the lack of understanding, and this dominated many of the interviews. So this lack of understanding was coming from medical staff, clinicians, friends, and indeed family members. So participants noted that the symptoms that their loved one was reporting were not recognised, but also their role as a carer was not being recognised due to the symptoms being primarily invisible. So then we had the psychosocial impacts. So we saw worry, fear, and withdrawal. So many aspects of these carers' lives have been altered due to the difficulties that their loved one was experiencing. So we see here at the top, she won't go off on her own, she will go with me. and I think my life is on hold, which is quite a powerful statement considering this person themselves is not suffering from the illness. And then finally, we have the coping strategies used by these participants. So acceptance really played a big role. There was no fight or drive by these carers. They were just accepting what they had been told because they were not getting recognised by anyone. They were not being provided with supports. And we see here in the first quote, "But I've come to terms with it," which again is quite powerful. They're not being provided with anything, so they can't provide the support to their loved ones. So what does this all mean? Really what we see is that there are a wide range of symptoms experienced by patients, and each participant was uniquely impacted by these symptoms. So negative emotions and lack of understanding from others is increasing the burden felt by these people. They have no support or any recognition. Subsequently, their mental health is being impacted, which is putting further stress on healthcare services. These people are not listened to and are accepting their difficulties, and as a result, they're not providing as quality care to the patients who are suffering with the illness, which again puts further stress on healthcare services, and it's that like circle, they can't get out of it then. So more people are suffering. So more resources need to be provided to these people to prevent these adverse outcomes. But in order for these resources to be provided, more research needs to be done. So thank you.
That's brilliant. And we can see some of the themes there crossing over. And I think I just say a little bit about the method that was used in the analysis. These interviews were recorded, transcribed, and then analyzed using thematic analysis. And so the headings that you see coming out as the emerging identified themes weren't top down, they were bottom up. And isn't it interesting that they're the same in the family interviews and in the people themselves interviews? And as you'll see now, the interviews or the blogs, the narrative data from the blogs was analyzed in the same way. I'll talk now about how that was done. So the 10 top and most recent threads from blogs were taken, and the data was collated and analyzed again using thematic analysis to see which main themes could be identified within that data. Okay, so it's not us saying we've got some nice headings, let's stick some stuff under it. It's what's being said, and let's sift through it and see what's being said by everyone. And I think that's really powerful. So what are they saying? Oh, I've done it again, Orla. Yeah, impact of swallowing. Okay, so again, the first one was the impact. You know, what's it like for people who have swallowing difficulties, who have fibromyalgia? And some of the same types of things were said in the blogs that were said in the interviews. I know I should eat. I'm having a hard time physically putting food in my mouth, chewing and swallowing. And, you know, this happens 3 times a day at least, more if you talk about me. And it's social. We do it with families. We do it alone. We do it when we're happy. We do it when we're sad. We do it when we're hungry. We do it when we're not hungry. We eat all the time. And people are having difficulty just putting food in their mouths. I think that's really powerful. I often choke on drinks or accidentally swallow air when trying to swallow soda, water. Some days are plain Cheerios, saltine crackers, and a glass of water the most thing I can handle. So huge impact. You know, it's one of the main things. We have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to move around, we have to communicate with other people, and these things are affected. Further descriptions. Weirdly, I find myself having more instances of stuff going down the wrong way, including my own saliva. And that's very worrying. This all has emotional impact. And again, this came from the data, not from kind of a structure of the talk or a structure put on the data. The data creates the structure. And here we have, I think, maybe one of the most difficult slides because you know, some of them just simply common words were broken, fear, frustrated, intense, scary every time, nerve-wracking, fear. Some days they can't eat or drink anything. These are real people. Now, it comes in waves. It's not every day. Some days are worse than others, and we know about that. But there are days like this. So what does the interface with medical profession look like? And it's not the whole medical profession. It's not all speech and language therapists. It's not all doctors. But the common theme can very often be that there's a misunderstanding or they're being misunderstood about what's actually happening for them. And so we have words like hypochondriac, backseat doctor. You have anxiety. You're crazy. It's probably trauma. That's a new word. That's a new buzzword, trauma. I have a lot to say about that as a psychologist, but that's another conference. Emotional issues. Okay. So if I don't know how to fix your problem, then maybe you're the problem. How do people cope, like on a practical day-to-day level, to get nutrition? Sometimes they try these thickening agents. That's not very pleasant. They try to find a few foods that they can tolerate and kind of stick to those, and that's nutritionally a problem. Try drinking Sprite, helps with meals. I try to have a carbonated beverage. Someone said that they recommend a very ice-cold smoothie or slushy. I liked that one. So coping is very practical. It really doesn't address any of the emotional issues. It doesn't address any of the fear or frustration. It addresses what's most important, and that's getting food in, for survival. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Your basic needs need to be met first. And people who have swallowing problems and fibromyalgia are working at that basic level. And the other things kind of get pushed aside, but they're there and they bubble up because when you push them down, they pop up when you least expect it. And that is very difficult and challenging. So what did this tell us? We know that it's firsthand. It's what people are experiencing. There are all of these things going on, the physical symptoms, the social, the emotional impact of the physical and the social, the coping strategies, and they are very practical. They are not at the emotional level. They are not at the social level. They are at the eating level. I find that very interesting because when I think of coping, I think more at the emotional level. How are you coping? But in actuality, it's very much at the practical level. How are you eating? That's how you're coping. How are you managing to eat? Another powerful finding. And then the experience of healthcare. Again, in the healthcare profession, people who enter the healthcare profession enter it to help. I think one of the best things I've ever been told about people is that people want to help. And we're always very afraid to ask for things. But when we do, people are wired to help. And that's a fun thing to know, I think. So when you're worried next time or you have trouble or you can't find something, people want to help. And the healthcare profession wants to help. They just don't know how. And very often, they're put in a position where if they don't know how, then it's not happening. It's not in their realm. It's your problem, not my problem. That there's a disconnect between I don't know what's happening here and I can't help. And, how we normally function as helpers. And so I'm not saying that the healthcare profession is to blame. I'm saying they're very much in the same position as you or me, in the position of needing education, in a position of starting to listen and to hear. And I think that's hugely important. The hearing of this. The telling of the story, the collecting of the narrative, the extracting of the themes, That's taking individual experiences and creating a collective. It's creating one voice, and that's powerful. You know, that's the first step, I think, towards empowerment of this group of people, of bringing that together. And I think it's through that creating of that cohesive story that can't be misinterpreted, reinterpreted, brushed off, brushed away, minimized, diminished, disbelieved, dismissed, and again, through no fault of people who are there to help, through no fault of their own, but through I don't know what to do with this. If we tell that story and go some way towards opening that conversation so that it becomes widely known and more research is done, and we move away from what's happening and what the problems are to what's happening and what can we do about them. And not just at the level of eating. I have to put the plug in for psychology. At the level of coping on an emotional level. At the level of coping on a social level. So there's a whole lot more to this. There are more facets to it than just the physical facet. And that's a very important story. So what are we going to do with it? We could talk about it all day and say things are bad, and they are. There are some steps. I like steps. Publication. We've collected this. We have the statistics. We have the narrative extracts. We've done the scientific analysis of the data. The onus is on us to publish it so that it's widely available in professional journals, on websites that are linked to and associated with, like our Chronic Pain and Arthritis Ireland. It's up to us to make sure the voices are heard. And in doing so, we begin to move towards solutions. And very much not only collecting what the problem is from the people themselves who are experiencing it, but moving on with this, doing more of this type of thing, and collecting what some of those solutions can be, and publishing those. So thank you so much.